This podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/Bogosity. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. That's audibletrial.com/Bogosity. Welcome to the Bogosity podcast for the 18th of April 2016, the podcast that hoverboards over ice rinks. This is your host, Shane Killian, and joining me again is Travis Retriever. Travis, welcome back to the podcast.
Good to be back.
Let's incapacitate the news of the bogus. And another update about the wonderful success the socialist state of Venezuela has been. Now, President Maduro is telling women to help out during this power crisis by not blow-drying their hair. Yeah, I'm sure that's really what's putting him over the top in power consumption there.
Just looking at that, it just reeked of desperation. I mean, come on. So the president is now Nicolas Maduro. Wasn't it Hugo Chavez, or was he voted out?
Hugo Chavez was president until he died in March of 2013.
Oh, wow.
He had been president since 1999.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, president, close quote, or dictator.
Well, not quite, because he has ministers and governors and things like that. He didn't do this mess alone, but...
Well, yeah. But something else that also struck me as fascinating is the fact that we're talking about Venezuela and them having an energy crisis, despite them being well known for being filled with oil.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, socialists thinking, oh, but it's natural resources. Well, no, it isn't. The fact that Venezuela, a country with tons of oil in it, is having a freaking energy crisis is proof positive that isn't a magic.
Well, they've got all these tons of oil that, of course, they've nationalized, and so they want to sell it to other countries. But most of their power is generated by, I think, a single hydroelectric plant.
You can have all the resources in the world, but if you don't know how to properly calculate, ascertain, and allocate them, it might as well not even exist.
Well, and it's also a question of incentives. I mean, when the government owns the oil, their incentive is to sell it to other countries so they can get lots of moolah to spend it on their favorite boondoggles.
But socialism doesn't have profits in it. That's a capitalist thing. Yeah. Oh, wait.
Yeah, but I mean, using it to generate power for the people, not quite so profitable there.
Yeah.
But if that were in the hands of a private market, where you'd have competition, you'd have all of this consumer demand for the oil, and they'd respond to that.
Indeed. But, you know, profits are to evil, unless they're from GovCo, in which case it's for we the people, or some sort of bollocks.
So anyway, he wants women to not use their hairdryers anymore, and he said, quote, "I always think a woman looks better when she just runs her fingers through her hair and lets it dry naturally. It's just an idea I have." Well, you know, judging by Maduro's picture, he's not giving up any of his hairstyling stuff.
Boosh. Also, wait, you would think the, socialists and panties, I mean feminists and the like, would be screaming misogyny, but, you know, it doesn't count because a guy in government, so that doesn't count.
Yeah, they don't seem to have weighed in on this, which is funny because they'll cry misogyny at every turn about everything else, but...
funny how that works.
Here we have something where you have an actual man in power telling women they shouldn't do things like blow-dry their hair, as if women are the only ones who do blow-dry their hair. I mean, I don't blow-dry mine, but plenty of guys do.
Yeah, you know. Especially if they have, like, really long hair and it's cold out, I would think.
So we've covered before about other things they've been doing, like Friday is a non-working day. They took, I think it was last week or the week before, they all just said, okay, nobody worked this week so that we can save power.
Oh my god.
Hang your clothes out to dry instead of using tumble dryers, and
oh my god,
embrace the tropical heat.
Yeah, and all its humid, horrifying goodness.
Yeah, embrace it until you fall over from heat stroke.
Yeah.
And of course, through it all, they're blaming it on the drought, they're blaming it on sabotage by their political opponents, they're blaming it on capitalism, but...
Oh my god. Serious? Oh my god. Well, then again, they blame our healthcare and banking markets on free market capitalism, despite them being about as capitalist as the USSR.
Oh, but you wouldn't have the internet without government.
Yeah, mostly run by private business. Funny how that works.
But, I mean, they could have other thermoelectric plants taking things like tidal power. Like you said, they could use oil. You know, it's not like they're stuck with nothing. And isn't it funny, the more you have a free market, the less you suffer from things like droughts.
Yeah, funny how that works. God, reminds me of that recent bit, well, pseudo-semi-recent bit in California. Oh, it's the drought, it's the farmers. No, it's Gulf Coast boondoggles sucking up tons of the water.
Oh, yeah, when they had environmental policies that were using twice as much water as all the farmers in the state combined.
Yeah, but you private citizens need to stop showering or bathing or be au naturel like hippies and stuff, because we need to buckle up while we take as much as we can, lol. Give me a break.
Yeah, and a lot of this is kind of a let them eat cake kind of thing. As Maria Corina Machado, a politician in the opposition party, said, quote, "Just because Maduro doesn't work Monday to Friday, Saturday or Sunday, doesn't mean we Venezuelans are like that. What we want is to keep working and for you, Maduro, to go."
And funny you should mention the let them eat cake thing. Wasn't it the Venezuelan government or someone in it who said let them eat fried rocks? Like, literally?
Yeah, that was one of the governors. I forget what his name was.
Oh my God.
Actually, he said, "We will eat fried rocks." I don't think he's going to be one of the ones crunching on granite, you know, funny enough. It's just amazing, though, that people with Venezuela are still crying, well, that's not real socialism. How come every example of socialism you point to all these hellholes? Well, gee, let me think.
Because they're socialist. And funny how whenever they try to give an example of, quote, successful socialism, close quote, note how it's always in the top 10 or at least the top 20 of the Index of Economic Freedom.
Well, and it's just like you point to Hong Kong, which has been number 1 on the index for I don't even know how many years.
About 20 last I checked.
But it goes back to, like you said earlier, with the natural resources, they go, oh, that's because they have a port.
Notice how it only seemed to actually be worth anything when they freed up their market, effectively going from mud huts to a modern economy in about 100 years.
Well, I mean, they don't have oil. Venezuela has oil. Venezuela is a coastal country. I don't know how many ports they have, but man, they've got ports and they've got easy access to the United States through them. But I mean, it's just like none of their excuses bear out, whereas we have it pretty consistent. You're better off, other things being equal, with a free economy than you are with a socialist economy.
When you get down to what those words actually mean, like, in the absence of the initiation of force, etc., it just makes so much sense. I mean, these are the same people who basically whine and cry about people hurting their feelings and microaggressions. You'd think that, a fortiori, they'd be even more against it on a much vaster scale, and realize, well, in my personal life, I don't like it when people aggress against me, so maybe I should extend that further. That's usually what kills me about so many of these communities, is that they just don't connect the dots.
Hi, I'm Dave. You may recognize me from previous Bogosity episodes. I'm also part of a podcast, the Superplex Brothers Podcast. Head on over to superplexbros.com. You can check out the podcast for video games and pro wrestling. We also have news, reviews, and editorials and all kinds of stuff just to talk about video games and pro wrestling and everything else that comes in between. So if you're into that, why don't you come check us out?
And now just more unbelievable Bogosity. Bear Branch Elementary School in Magnolia, Texas has, get this, banned parents walking their child to school.
Oh, dear Lord. I mean, you would think that as bad as obesity is, especially in the South, that they'd be encouraging it.
But no, if you walk to school to pick your child up, you could be charged with trespassing. So this is the policy of Principal Holly Ray, and her school is losing students over this policy because parents are taking their kids out of the school and putting them in private school. And one of them is Wendy Jarman, who says of the principal, quote, "She's threatening to arrest people. This has happened to many parents. They have been cited. They have been threatened if they step 1 foot onto school property, they will be arrested and charged with who knows what." And Frank Young is another one who's pulled his children out of the school. He mentioned several times that they've tried to negotiate with her to get a more sensible policy. Not even hundreds of signatures on a petition would sway her. And he says, quote, "Mrs. Ray's policy is implying that a parent doesn't have the ability or capability to decide what is safest for her children and that the school district does." And yes, the school district is backing up the principal on this.
File under no surprise.
But they say they've been doing this for years, walking to school to pick up their kids, and there's been nothing unsafe about it. They don't cite anything like any child abductions or anything else that's happened that prompted this. It just seems like some sort of power-hungry bureaucrat overstepping her boundaries.
And you know what the kicker is? This is pretty much the exact same kind of thing that happens with GovCo that we're told would happen if we had a completely privatized system. Yeah, as has been said before, everything you fear without government is already here.
Well, and if it does happen with a private system, you can just take your kids somewhere else. I mean, all these parents that are taking them out can apparently, fortunately, afford to put their kids in a private school, but not all of them can.
Yeah, which means, as usual, the government policy, of course, hurts the most disadvantaged people.
Always.
Absolutely. When we have these, like, bans and stuff for, like, feeding and housing the homeless, the worst of those policies tend to be cities basically dominated by liberals and liberal politicians, like New York, California, etc.
Yeah, in Florida, and we've covered a whole bunch of those too. You can't donate leftover bagels to the homeless because it might have too much salt or whatever. I don't think too much salt is a big problem the homeless have.
And even then, add a little potassium for it, and it should be cardioprotective.
Well, that's the thing. First of all, it only makes a difference if you have high blood pressure. Second, it's the sodium-potassium ratio.
Yeah, basically, you want at least as much potassium in your diet as you do sodium. I mean, if you already have high blood pressure, or it affects you like that, then you might be salt sensitive, but if you don't, then you should be pretty much fine, and you shouldn't need to worry about it at all.
But as this article closes off, they're not just losing parents and students, they're losing teachers and staff over this policy as well. So
good.
What's Principal Ray gonna do when she doesn't have anyone else left at the school?
Well, she didn't want people to trespass, and it looks like people are taking that as a sign to not go there at all.
Yeah, pretty much.
Problem solved.
It's a similar thing to what I think about our Cuba policy, which makes absolutely no sense to us. Why don't we open up immigration to Cubans, not just the ones who happen to make it to soil, you know, Americans on land, Cubans on the sea, you know, and if they're like 2 inches away from it, the Coast Guard will pick them up and take them back. Let them come in, and what's the Cuban government going to do when they don't have any more people to oppress?
I know, right?
If you're on the Wi-Fi in a coffee shop or hotel, anyone on that network can get your traffic. Do you really trust all of those strangers? For that matter, do you really trust your ISP? A VPN can protect you from prying eyes, disguise your location, and even foil government censors. It's essential in this day and age, so go to vpn.bogosity.tv and you'll be taken to BoxPN. Starting at just $2.99 a month, you can get unlimited high-speed connections to VPN servers all over the world, and they don't log connections, so your privacy is assured. Traveling abroad, just VPN home, and don't worry about what those other governments are doing. Back at home, stop your ISP from traffic shaping and messing with the quality internet access you're paying good money for. You can connect from multiple machines at once, including your smartphone or tablet, and it supports all the secure standards, including OpenVPN and SSTP. Bypass censors and surveillance with your own secure VPN connection. Go to vpn.bogosity.tv. And now, good news from the Supreme Court. In a 5-3 decision, they ruled that the government may not freeze assets needed to pay defense attorneys if those assets aren't specifically linked to a crime.
Yay! Nice.
They made sense!
And even better, look, instead of, what was it, a 5-4 decision, it was a 5-3 decision. Oh my god, we're actually making some progress.
Well, because Scalia died.
Oh, well... Yeah, I mean...
It's kind of hard to vote if you're a dead guy.
Well,
although it has happened in Chicago a few times.
Oh, God.
So this involves the case of Celia Luis, a name I have probably messed up, but she's a woman from Florida, who was charged with Medicare fraud. According to the government, she got $45 million in services that she was not entitled to. But almost all of her profits from the fraud have already been spent. Apparently, she has another $2 million in assets, and if you have $2 million in assets, how do you get Medicare to begin with? I don't know. But prosecutors asked the judge to freeze those $2 million, even though they're not connected to the fraud, saying that they could be used to pay fines and provide restitution if she's convicted. And Luis just said, well, just let me have at least some of that money to pay my lawyers. You know, we've talked about that same kind of thing with Kim.com. So the Supreme Court ruled that that violated her Sixth Amendment right to the assistance of counsel, and Justice Breyer wrote the majority opinion, and he talked about the government seizing, quote, a robber's loot, a drug seller's cocaine, a burglar's tools, or other property associated with the planning, implementing, or concealing of a crime, but went on to say that if the money's not connected to the crime, it's a little unclear. I think they can still seize it, but they have to surrender whatever money the defendant is spending on counsel.
Okay, so it's at least a step in the right direction, if anything else.
I mean, I say just let them use whatever money, because they're saying, oh, well, this money was used in the... Well, innocent until proven guilty, people.
Yeah.
If you haven't proved that they're guilty, it's still their money.
Absolutely. And of course, the people who try to say, oh, innocent until proven guilty is flawed or whatever. Yeah, because basing policy on a logical fallacy is totally rational, you guys.
So the case this is built on is United States versus Monsanto in 1989.
Monsanto! Oh, God.
I don't know if that's the same Monsanto or not.
Oh, gosh. I had to say it. I'm sorry.
But the court ruled that you could freeze the assets even if it prevented the defendant from hiring a lawyer, as long as you have probable cause that the crime had been committed and the assets were specifically linked to that offense.
Why do I get the impression that, quote, probable cause, close quote, has been abused so many times, it's not even funny?
Well, that's true, but I mean, at least there's that much protection that they can only freeze those assets and they can't just take everything.
True.
Like they did with Kim.com.
God.
But Justice Thomas sided with the plurality, but had what I think was a little more intelligent approach, that it doesn't make any difference that it concerns limits on the defendant's ability to pay to exercise a constitutional right. Quote, the right to keep and bear arms, for example, implies a corresponding right to obtain the bullets necessary to use them.
Yes.
And the right to free speech implies the right to spend money to make sure the speech is heard. And that echoes something that we've talked about before with campaign finance reform.
Citizens United.
Yeah, because if you can't spend money to express your disapproval of a politician or a candidate, they can say, oh, you have free speech, but you can't actually spend money to make your voice heard. No, that's a violation of free speech.
Personal, economic, and social freedom are inseparable. If someone wants to limit one, then they are inevitably limiting the others as well. No way around it. It's something the Democrats screaming bloody murder about the campaign finance reform stuff, like the Citizen United case, would do well to understand.
But the horrible thing about this decision is that it wasn't 8-0. Kennedy, Alito, and Kagan dissented, and listen to what they had to say. This is from Kennedy's dissent, quote, a defendant has no Sixth Amendment right to spend forfeitable assets or assets that will be forfeitable, I guess we have to be psychic now, on an attorney. And I don't remember, I read the Sixth Amendment, I don't remember that part being in there.
I wasn't aware that them having authority, if you can even call it that, made them magic, omnipotent, or psychic. Give me a break.
Well, I mean, they'll just read all sorts of things into the Constitution whenever they want to, like with the Kelo decision.
Yeah.
Quote, the government has only a modest interest in forfeitable assets that may be used to retain an attorney, in light of the importance of separating criminals from their ill-gotten gains and providing restitution to victims of crime.
Moderate interest, my ass. It was over either the past year or two or whatever. Police stole more in the form of asset forfeiture than all the robbers and burglars and the like combined.
I think it was just burglaries.
Well, okay, yeah. Well, but then you get into government fraud and Ponzi scams, but that's,
yeah.
Ooh.
Trying to compare like and like here.
Yeah.
But the whole point here seems to be, oh, gee, if they spend this money on a lawyer, then we won't get it when it's convicted,
Poor little baby.
Quote, the restraint itself does not prevent a defendant from seeking to convince his or her counsel of choice to take on the representation without advance payment. You can just say, oh, please represent me for free.
Jeez.
It does not disqualify any attorney the defendant might want, and it does not prevent a defendant from borrowing funds to pay for an attorney who is otherwise too expensive. So just go into debt.
Oh, jeez.
We're government. We like that debt stuff anyway.
Yeah.
Oh, check this one out. Quote, Given the large volume of defendants in the criminal justice system who rely on public representation, it would be troubling to suggest that a defendant who might be represented by a public defender will receive inadequate representation. Why, yes, Kennedy, it would. It would be disturbing.
Hey, guy, you want to know how you can reduce that number? Get rid of the drug war. That'll reduce the number of those cases immensely. And while you're at it, maybe get rid of the other victimless crimes like tax evasion and the other crap as well.
And did you spot the logical fallacy?
I could barely parse that mess, to be honest, but go ahead.
Argument from adverse consequences. It would be horrible to me if something were true, therefore it must not be true.
Yeah, figures.
I mean, basically he's saying that the government can do whatever they can to stop you getting the attorney of your choice as long as you have public defenders available. But think about what kind of country it would be if the only counselors defendants were allowed to have were directly employed by the government.
Yeah, no conflict of interest there, lol. It was either you or someone else saying that, quote, my strength as a skeptic is my ability to be more confused by fiction than, or I guess BS in this case, than by reality. So I guess the fact that it confused and threw me for a loop going, the hell is he going on about? I'd like to think that means I have a good BS detector. I might not be as articulate as you or Hawkeye, but I'd like to think that my math skills and aptitude in that area can help make up for it. I've always been phenomenal at math and stuff like that.
Yeah, I got that one from Elise Yudkowsky. But anyway. But Kagan's dissent, if anything, is worse.
Oh, Jesus.
Quote, a convicted felon has no Sixth Amendment right to pay his lawyer with funds adjudged forfeitable. Following conviction, such assets belong to the government, and there is no constitutional principle that gives one person the right to give another's property to a third party. Of course, they haven't been convicted yet. This is not following conviction, so again, presumed guilty from the outset.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I wasn't aware that you as a judge or a prosecutor were fucking all-knowing, you narcissist.
Quote, given that money is fungible, the plurality's approach leads to utterly arbitrary distinctions as among criminal defendants who are, in fact, guilty. Because we know that because we're omnipotent. The thief who immediately dissipates his ill-gotten gains and thereby preserves his other assets is no more deserving of chosen counsel than the one who spends those two pots of money in reverse order. Yet the plurality would enable only the first defendant and not the second to hire the lawyer he wants. I cannot believe the Sixth Amendment draws that irrational line.
Oh.
Hey, Kagan, have you stopped to consider that before the trial is over, you don't know if the accused belongs to that first group or not?
Adding to that, so does that include the massive amount pillaged by you and your fellow government to spend on bullshit, wars, murder, rape, etc.?
Yeah.
Just a quick thought.
Oh, they can spend however much they want to on a prosecution.
Natch.
Guys, Franz Kafka was not writing how-to manuals.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. Kennedy, Alito, and Kagan are enemies of justice. Now you can make Amazon purchases with Bitcoin by going to purse.bogosity.tv. That's P-U-R-S-E. Moreover, most purchases can be made at a discount. Save an average of 20% just by buying from Purse, or get even greater discounts by linking your Amazon wish list. Go to purse.bogosity.tv. Bogosity.tv is a participant in the Amazon Services LLC Associates Program, an affiliate advertising program designed to provide a means for sites to earn advertising fees by advertising and linking to Amazon.com. Just clear your cookies and go to amazon.bogosity.tv, or check the right-hand side of the podcast page for Amazon's best deals, including the deal of the day and limited-time lightning deals on all sorts of great products. So next time you buy online, go to amazon.bogosity.tv. And now let's misattribute this week's biggest Bogon emitter. And this week it goes to MIT Technology Review editor Brian Bergstein, who blames the wrongful arrest in the Devin Godfrey murder case on, get this, Apple's iPhone encryption. Now, I was trying to find out details of this case. Pretty much all the results I got were about this particular story here, but from what little I was able to get, Devin Godfrey was a guy who was stabbed in his apartment in 2010, and police arrested the wrong person. Then they figured it out, and they arrested this other guy. They gave the name of the other guy. I didn't write it down, but I couldn't find the name of the person they wrongfully arrested. Maybe they never released it, which would be a good thing. You know, let's not go dragging someone's name through the mud or anything. But the point is, they screwed up, and when they figured it out, I think through security camera footage is how they finally figured it out, they said, whoops, we got the wrong guy. They did the right thing. They let him go, and they arrested the other guy, and the other guy was convicted.
Good to know.
So all of the evidence that they compiled and used in the case has nothing to do with this locked phone. What Bergstein says is, quote, Arnold, who was the prosecutor, recalls doing what he always did in homicides back then. He obtained a search warrant for the phone, looked more closely at the apartment building surveillance video, and Arnold examined records sent him by Godfrey's wireless carrier of when calls and texts were last made on the phones. From the wireless carrier, Arnold saw that someone, presumably Godfrey, had sent a text from the iPhone at a certain time, but the recipient of that text had used a disposable burner phone not registered under a true name. So who was it? The iPhone itself had the crucial clue. Arnold could see that Godfrey referred to the person by a nickname. People who knew Godfrey helped police identify the man who went by that nickname. It was not the man who was originally arrested. It was, here's his name, Rafael Rosario, who also appeared in the apartment surveillance footage. Rosario confessed and later pleaded guilty. So they didn't need the iPhone anyway.
So, in other words, basically he's trying to make a case or an argument for this using an example that doesn't even support him.
Right. And this was an iPhone. The text messages, the contact list, all of that would have been backed up to iCloud. And as we've talked about before, Apple's perfectly happy to assist law enforcement in saying, okay, sure, we'll give you access to whatever we can get in the iCloud. You don't need to break the phone's encryption to do that. But I mean, this goes into the whole, going dark thing about how, all of a sudden they're not able to do this. No, this is stuff they weren't able to do before. I mean, they try to associate it with wiretapping orders, but wiretapping has to be done at the time. It can't be done after the fact. There's no way to go back in time and do it.
Indeed.
All you could do then is go to the phone company and get the records of who called who when, the same kind of records they could get here.
So the metadata.
Yeah, but once again, the smartphone is like this holy grail of information they could use.
Natch.
And they want it. And that's what this is about. But I mean, that is unprecedented access.
So in other words, it's a power grab, nothing more, a political move.
Yeah, I mean, what they're wanting is unprecedented.
Pretty much. They basically want to know is even more information about you than they can. But God forbid, if someone like Snowden blows the whistle on crap that they're doing, well, he's a traitor and must be assassinated or put on trial, won't be able to put on defense, he's the worst thing ever, and stole Uncle Sam's stripy pantsuits, etc.
So Bergstein said, quote, so is Apple ultimately fighting to uphold personal privacy and civil liberties, or is it fighting for the right to sell any kind of phone it thinks its customers want while other people deal with the negative consequences?
The externalities argument, because, war, bailouts, and all that other crap totally has no negative consequences, but that doesn't count because reasons.
Society is not necessarily best served by letting Apple make whatever phones are optimal for its chosen business strategy. See, it's all about society, Travis. Individuals don't have rights when society needs to be served.
Just like the forest has rights over the individual trees in the forest, which is why we need to chop each tree down. Har.
Yep. Robber barons must be taught society comes first.
Even though, according to all the available real-world data, they're the ones serving society best of all. Oh, but that doesn't count, or, but that's exploitation, those numbers aren't good, yada yada yada, because GovCo is omnipotent and omniscient. All hail the omnipotent holy state.
So Bergstein closes out, quote, the justice system is far from infallible, but it is run by people whose duty is to something more than a set of shareholders. One more example of how statism poisons the mind just as much as any religion.
As far as I'm concerned, statism is a religion, and it's the most dangerous of all by a long mile.
Pretty much. I mean, it's like, how dare Apple make a profit for its shareholders while giving consumers what they want? What about what the government wants?
But you see, it's companies and non-government entities who are, quote, entitled, close quote. Well, I give Apple a lot of flack, even more than most of your tech and Linux buddies probably do give Microsoft. But if there's one thing I'll admit that Apple does do well, and is probably the one thing that would convince me to maybe get an Apple phone, it would be their vastly superior security. So for doing that, Apple, good on ya. And for those of you who are more liberty-minded and who actually want a legit reason to convince guys like me who are more liberty-minded but a bit less tech-savvy to rightfully hate Microsoft and Bill Gates, show them that article that Shane presented, or whoever it was, of Bill Gates supporting GovCo fighting Apple's encryption. And I guarantee you, they will be flipping pictures of him off in a heartbeat, as I know I was too.
Oh, Microsoft did support the FBI over Apple over that San Bernardino iPhone.
Oh, well then fuck you, Microsoft, then.
So all of that makes Brian Bergstein this week's biggest Bogon emitter. Hackers, terrorists, the NSA. But I repeat myself. Your online security is under attack, and the weakest point is your password. That's why you need LastPass. LastPass plugs into your browser and allows you to randomly generate strong, unique passwords anywhere on the web, all protected by one master password. LastPass sets up in minutes and gives you secure automatic logins throughout the web, synchronizing across all your browsers and all your computers, at home, at work, or on the road. It even securely stores sensitive form data, including credit card numbers, backup sensitive documents, membership info, Wi-Fi logins, and more. And with LastPass Premium, you can get these benefits on other applications and even mobile devices, and also get priority customer support. Sign up at password.bogosity.tv for a free month of LastPass Premium. Log in securely everywhere using the last password you'll ever have to remember. Go to password.bogosity.tv and get LastPass now. And now it's time to de-euthanize this week's Idiot Extraordinaire. And this week it goes to the RIAA for more DMCA Bogosity. This time, RIAA Chief Carrie Sherman is accusing, of all people, YouTube of running a DMCA protection racket.
There is just so much wrong with that statement. If I were to dissect and deconstruct it, we'd be here all day.
How about DMCA is a protection racket?
Yeah, that's a good start.
So, YouTube has developed all these partnerships with the major recording labels and movie makers and things like that to do things like make it easier for them to monetize their content online. If you upload a video and it has copyrighted music on it, their Content ID system can match that. And if they don't have a partnership with whoever owns the rights to license that music, then they'll give you a copyright strike. If they do, they'll just monetize it and give them the money. I mean, that's a system that seems to work. But these deals are now starting to expire, and now there's all these negotiations going around. And so Sony and Warner and Universal and all these people are trying to demand better terms. And they're trying to claim that YouTube is gaming the system and taking advantage of the safe harbor provision of the DMCA. Now, absent the DMCA, it's long-standing precedent that you cannot hold a website responsible for the actions of its users. The DMCA says that you can if your users upload copyrighted content unless you go through these procedures. In other words, a user uploads something, the rights holder issues a DMCA complaint, you have to take it down for at least 10 business days and then go through the whole process of notifying the person and etc. And YouTube responds to these very quickly, as anyone who's ever had it done to them like me knows. But the RIAA says, and this should be a surprise to no one, that it's not stopping this proliferation of unlicensed music being uploaded, because all you can do is upload it once they take it down, but then you take it down, but then other people have uploaded it. So you're just chasing your tail around the maypole there. It's funny because Sherman actually said the DMCA was dysfunctional. It's like, well, you people lobbied for it.
Yeah. So no unthought out implications there, lol.
So he says, quote, "When you compare what we get when we get to freely negotiate with a company like Spotify versus what we get when we were under the burden of an expansively interpreted safe harbor, when you're negotiating with somebody like YouTube, you can see that you're not getting the value across the platforms that you should." But he's really comparing apples and oranges there. Spotify doesn't have users uploading content, I don't think. I think they're just like, okay, let us use your music, and then they provide the music. So it's not really an issue with Spotify.
I haven't read through this article, but I'm wondering if they actually seriously call YouTube terrorists or something, because that would just be hilarious if they did.
Not quite. They don't quite go that far, but what they're saying is, like, if someone posts a video with music that they don't have the rights to, and the RIAA takes it down, YouTube should automatically take that down for every other video uploaded that has that music. But a lot of people are filmmakers who actually purchase the rights to use it in their video and therefore can upload it to YouTube, but they just want to permanently say no more of that music on YouTube.
Yeah, good luck.
Quote, if we had a system where once a song was taken down, you had a filtering system that prevented it from going back up, we wouldn't have to be sending hundreds of millions of notices on the same content over and over again.
Poor baby.
But again, what about the people who have purchased a license to use that music in their videos?
And this is also, of course, ignoring the elephant in the room, that IP is logically unjustifiable, as has been pointed out by several others, because it violates real property rights, and just saying, well, it's the law and the law exists for a reason, is a complete begging the question. You could say the same thing about the Holocaust, Stalin's purges, and countless other atrocities. And in fact, if I recall correctly, that actually was part of the justification of those things way back then. Funny how those justifications would absolutely not fly and be seen as outright abhorrent and disgusting today. Oh, but this is different, even though it causes the vast amount of damage and destruction of people and property that it does.
So Google hasn't directly responded to Sherman's comments, but they did send a statement to the Copyright Office where they said, in part, quote, some in the recording industry have suggested that the safe harbors somehow diminish the value of sound recordings, pointing to YouTube and blaming the DMCA for creating a so-called power grab.
Oh my god.
This claim is not supported by the facts. This claim ignores Content ID, which has been in existence since 2008, and which record labels and many other copyright owners use every day to monetize their works on YouTube. Thanks to Content ID, record labels do not have to rely solely on the DMCA's notice and takedown process on YouTube. They can remove any or all user uploads of their works from the platform on an automated and ongoing basis. Indeed, since January 2014, over 98% of all YouTube copyright removal claims have come through Content ID. Although business partners can be expected to disagree from time to time about the price of a license, any claim that the DMCA safe harbors are responsible for a value gap for music on YouTube is simply false.
YouTube is just doing what it can to avoid liability, which it wouldn't have to do if the DMCA and other such bogus laws weren't a thing. The DMCA is awful by design. It's guilty until proven innocent. And if I recall correctly, because of how the law works, unless YouTube does what they do, it would be YouTube being held liable. They're just doing what they can to avoid that.
Yeah, I just find it hilarious that the RIAA of all people can accuse anyone else of running a protection racket. They're the ones with all the political power here.
It's like, give me a freaking break. Crybolio. Sheesh.
So that just has to make the RIAA this week's
Idiot Extraordinaire.
Well, that wraps up this More People Watch the Fish Tank at Leo's Pet Store edition of the Bogosity podcast. Come join the discussion at forum.bogosity.tv and feel free to join in by sending a question, statement, news article, or rant in text or audio to podcast@bogosity.tv. This podcast depends on you to keep going, so please donate using the links on the website or the QR codes on the YouTube video. You can also become a patron at patreon.bogosity.tv and get the podcast and YouTube videos early and without ads or promos. Thank you for listening, and thanks again to Travis Retriever for joining me.
It was good to be here.
Until next time, here's a quote from Lawrence Lessig. Our trend in copyright law has been to enclose as much as we can. The consequence of this enclosure is a stifling of creativity and innovation. If the internet teaches us anything, it is that great value comes from leaving core resources in a commons where they're free for people to build upon as they see fit. The Bogosity podcast is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License.
Bogosity.
Want answers to creationist claims against evolution? Would you like to know more about evolution yourself, or even engage creationists more directly, with actual peer-reviewed sources to back you up? My book, How Evolution is Scientific, is designed to show the basics of evolutionary theory and how it is so well supported using the scientific method. It's impeccably sourced, with references to the actual scientific material, and is arranged using the creationists' own criteria of what is scientific. Using their own arguments against them, see how evolution is scientific, but creationism is not, based on observations, accurate predictions, logic, and evidence. Get answers to common creationist claims, and even a primer on abiogenesis, the start of all life. It's all in my book, How Evolution is Scientific, available at Amazon and on Kindle, EPUB, and PDF as well. Get How Evolution is Scientific and never be taken in by creationists again.
I will be very happy if I can live to see the day the state BS dies.
Don't we all?
Yeah. Until then, may all of y'all find what freedom you can in an unfree world. Stay floofy and stay smiling.